The first knock on my door wasn't friendly. It wasn't a welcome to the neighborhood basket or a smile. It was fists hammering like they owned the place. I had been in the house less than 48 hours when the HOA stormed in, clipboards in hand, smug faces lined with entitlement. They didn't come to greet me. They came to demand. "That lake," one of them said, pointing past my shoulder toward the shimmering water out back. "That's HOA property. You'll need to sign over rights if you plan on staying here." Their arrogance dripped like oil. What they didn't know was simple, devastating, and about to change everything. The lake was mine. Not only mine on paper, but mine in power. And every single one of their precious docks their families fished from, their kids swam off of, their boats tied to sat on my water. I didn't argue. I let them rant. I let them lay out their threats of fines, their talk of bylaws, their smug little warnings about what happens when you go against the community. Their words rolled off me like waves hitting stone. Because while they talked, all I could think about was the deed in my safe, stamped and signed, declaring in black and white that I owned every inch of the short line, every drop of that water, and full control over the docks they thought were untouchable. When they finally stormed out, satisfied with their intimidation, I walked down to the lake. The sun set fire to the ripples, golden light dancing across the surface. 30-plus docks stretched out into the water, each one tied to homes that weren't mine, each one nailed into wood that sat in my lake. It wasn't just water they wanted, it was power. The lake was the jewel of the neighborhood, the reason property values soared, the reason they could brag about waterfront living. And in their arrogance, they had forgotten to secure the one thing that made their community special. They didn't own it. I did. The next HOA meeting was already circled on their calendar, and I showed up uninvited. Heads turned. Whispers rolled through the room. They weren't used to new blood, standing tall, calm, unafraid. When they tried to skip past me on the agenda, I slid the deed across the table. Papers slapped wood. Gasps filled the room. The HOA president, a sharp-tongued man with a face permanently twisted into superiority, grabbed the papers, scanned them, and turned pale. "This isn't possible," he muttered, but it was. I leaned forward, steady and deliberate. "Your docks, they're on my water. Your boats, they float because I allow it. You stormed into my house, demanding my lake, but now I am here to tell you the truth. You, Dan T., have the right to demand anything." The silence that followed was the kind that cracks stone. Neighbors shifted in their chairs, realization sinking in. For years, the HOA had ruled unchecked, tossing fines like candy, bullying anyone who dared to stand tall. But now the power dynamic had flipped overnight. I didn't make threats that evening. I didn't need to. I just let the weight of the truth hang in the air. When I left the meeting, their faces were masks of shock, fear, and denial. But deep down, they all knew the game had changed. Days later, the letters started arriving, pleas disguised as formal requests. Suddenly, the tone was softer. "We'd like to discuss shared access. Perhaps we can work out a community arrangement." It was almost funny how fast arrogance turns to begging when control slips away. I ignored most of them. Instead, I walked the shoreline, inspecting every dock, every ladder, every rotting board nailed into my property. For the first time in years, the HOA was forced to face the fact that they weren't in charge. The best part, the law was on my side. Not only did I own the lake, but liability shifted to me. That meant every dock, every boat, every kid who splashed off the edge, all of it rested under my control. I could shut it down in an instant. And they knew it. When they finally came groveling face to face, the HOA president tried to wear his old mask of power, but the cracks were too deep. His voice trembled as he asked, "What do you want?" I smiled. "What I want is simple. Respect. No fines. No harassment. No ridiculous rules about what flowers I can plant or where my trash can sits. I want you to remember that the water your families enjoy flows because I allow it. Step out of line again, and every dock in this neighborhood disappears. Permanently." It wasn't an empty threat. One phone call to zoning, and I could have every single dock dismantled for trespassing. Overnight, the neighborhood's shining jewel would become worthless. Property values would tank. Their empire would crumble, and they knew I had the will to do it. Since that day, the HOA hasn't knocked on my door. No more fines, no more threats. When I walk to the lake, heads bow. When my Jeep rumbles past, nobody complains. I became the unspoken authority, the ghost that looms over their every decision. And the irony, they tried to bully me for the lake, but in the end, the lake made me untouchable. Now, when I sit on the dock, the water laps against the wood, calm, steady, loyal. The sunset stretches across the horizon, painting the surface in molten gold. And behind me, in their neat little homes, the HOA whispers my name, like a curse they don't dare speak aloud. They thought they could control me. They thought they could take what was mine. But now, every time they dip a toe in that water, they're reminded of the truth. The lake is mine. The docks are mine. And so is their silence.